How to Make Ornament Hollowing Tools by John Lucas. Well, good morning. I'm going to be doing an ornament demo on how to make hollowed out ornaments coming up shortly. And I thought it would be nice to do a demo to show everybody how to make the ornament hollowing tools. As far as I know, there aren't a lot of sets out there available. I know Mike Hunter sells a carbide set of tools. It's really wonderful. But these are the ones that I make, and they're made out of high carbon steel, and anybody can make them with some simple tools. So I'm going to show you how to do that this morning. The first thing you'll need to buy some high carbon steel. I buy what's called drill rod. I can get it from local places, but any metalworking tool company will probably have them. I cut them down to the length I need, and you'll also need a torch of some kind. I use MAP gas, but you could use propane. I also use these fire bricks. It speeds up the heating, so I don't use quite so much gas. And you need some water for quenching. I forgot to say the rods that I buy are W1, which means they're water hardening. So I don't need oil to harden them with, which makes it a lot simpler. So let's go through the process now. The first thing I'm going to do is rough grind the tip. We want to do that while the metal's still soft. It'll go a little faster. This is my 45-year-old grinder that I bought way back when. So what I want to do is I want to establish the nose angle. I want the nose angle to be roughly 55, 60 degrees. You do need to keep some water handy. I had to stop and cool it. At this stage, we're not worried about overheating the metal, but it gets too hot for my fingers. So once I get the nose angle ground, I want to grind the sides down. That's one side. Then we'll grind this side. What we're grinding sort of resembles a bowl gouge, with a swing back tip. You'll notice, you might be able to see that, how they're ground in to give me some relief. Then I want to grind a negative rake on top. A little bit longer than that. Not like that. That's pretty close. Now what I do is I want to blend the corners in. So this is just like you would sharpen a bowl gouge. If you had a bowl gouge that didn't have any kind of grind on it. What I'm looking for is that fingernail shape on top. I want to find that relief angle, drag it around. Be really light on the nose. And then I want to grind off this bottom corner, because we don't need that. We don't want that to get in the way while we're hollowing. So I grind that away. So that's roughly what it should look like. Now what we want to do is we want to heat the tool red hot, and the way metal works is I want to bend the tip right about here. This is going to be our bent tip tool. I want to bend it right here, and where you heat it red hot is where it's going to bend the easiest. So we'll heat this up. It'll take a minute. That's why I prefer to use the MAP gas and the fire bricks. It heats up a lot faster. It still takes a little bit of doing it. We're going to heat it right beyond the tip, because that's where I want to bend it. All right, it's starting to get red. Back it back down a little bit, because right there is where I want it to be hot. That's good. All right, so then I put it in my little bending jig here. And I bend that tip right where I want it, which is probably about there, maybe 45 degrees is pretty good. I'm going to cool it down. Then what we need to do is I want to heat it red hot. We have to heat it to what the blacksmiths call cherry red. I'll show you that. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Now the problem when you're new to blacksmithing, you don't really truly understand what red hot heat is. It's called the critical temperature. What we have to do is get it hot enough that it changes the carbon inside and hardens it. And the easiest way to do that is to make it so it's non-magnetic. You can see right now, if I stick a magnet to it, it's stuck. So we'll heat it back up. And we only really need to heat the tip. We don't need to heat the whole thing. It's just about there. There we go. Now it's getting red. Now it's getting what I call cherry red. So we'll check it real quick. See, my magnet's not sticking to it. So I want to get that color back. There we go. Now it's cherry red again. And then we quench it. Now you got to stir it around. And now we've hardened the tip. Now it's actually too hard. It's harder to sharpen. So we want to do what's called annealing it. First thing we do is we clean it off so we can see the colors. There is actually a simple way to anneal if you want to. You can just simply put it in the oven at 425 degrees and leave it sit there for a half an hour. Well, I don't think you want me to sit there during a video for a half an hour. So I'll show you the way the blacksmiths do it. We polish the edge, and what we're trying to get is what's called a straw color. I'm going to heat it up back here so I can show you what the difference is. First it'll turn, okay, now it's getting a little straw color. Now it's getting dark straw. Now it's getting blue. What I want to show you is you can see that it's kind of straw, it's kind of dark straw right there. It's blue right here. There it's kind of light straw colored. So what we can do is we can heat it up until that light straw goes out to the tip. So I'm just going to gradually heat it. Watch that color. What I want to show you is you can see that it's kind of straw, it's kind of dark straw right there. It's blue right here. There it's kind of light straw colored. So what we can do is we can heat it up until that light straw goes out to the tip. So I'm just going to gradually heat it. Watch that color. Oops. I went just a little too far. I got anxious. Yeah, it's just right on the blue. So what we can do is simply go back and re-harden it and re-temper it to get it correct. I wanted to show you that because I want you to know that you can redo it if you mess up. And the other reason is simply to show you it takes patience. You got to slow down. So I'm going to go through the hardening process again. You don't have to watch that. Okay, I re-hardened it and then I polished the steel so you can see the color better. So we're going to start heating it down here. I'm going to let the heat creep up the tool. What I want to do, see now it's starting to turn blue. Right there. Okay, now it's straw colored out toward the ends of where it's not blue. There goes the straw color. It's moving its way up toward the tip. Watch it stop it right there. There we go. Now we have a light straw color all the way out to the tip. So that's what I want to get. That leaves the metal hardened somewhere around Rockwell 62, which is about what most turning tools are. So now that we've got that, I want to go back and actually sharpen this tip. Okay, I've gone to my grinder with the CBN wheels. If you have a regular grinder, you want to round over the edges, and I'll show you why in a few minutes. You can do that with a diamond, a T-type diamond hone, or any other really hard stone that might soften your edges a little bit. What I'm going to be doing is I've set this up to about 55 degrees. Or 60, I think it is, yeah, 60 degrees. And what I'm going to do is you can either swing it around like this and grind the sides, which is a little tricky to do, or you can simply go over here at this rounded edge and we'll tilt it this way so that we undergrind it, tilt it out the other direction so that we cut a relief on both sides, and we've already got the relief on the nose. And we'll just be very light. We don't have to be strong because we've already ground the shape. What I want to do is look at that nose very carefully and grind that nose into a fingernail grind. Be real gentle. And then I want to grind off the bottom. Then I want to go back and grind that top surface. Get my negative rake back. Now you want to take a little time getting that top surface right, because you never have to grind that again. Every time you go to sharpen, all you want to do is simply clean up this area, clean up that area, and you're done and you're ready to go. So that's roughly what the edge should look like. Okay, now I'm going to show you how I make my tool handles. I simply mount the wood between centers and I pre-drill the wood. What I find is if I turn the handle first and then try to drill that hole, I never get it straight or it wanders very slightly. This way I drilled it on the lathe with a chuck. So now it's perfectly centered on there as I turn it down. I'm going to use my spindle roughing gouge. Turn it pretty high RPM because it's a small spindle. Don't want to run into my drive center there. Right there, it's not round yet. Now it's round. So now what I've done is I've set my calipers. I use a piece of copper pipe. You can use brass or copper. You can turn that easily with high-speed steel tools, or carbide if you want. Doesn't matter what this dimension is. I simply set it for that dimension, and then I lock it down real good and firm. And I use my parting tool first to figure out how deep I want it. So I make a line and I check it and I go in just a hair more, and that's about where I want it. So then I'm going to remove a little bit of wood here. Then what I do is I take my calipers, and if you don't feel comfortable doing this, stop the lathe and measure. You'll make a cut and measure. What I do is by being very gentle with the calipers, I can go in there and size it until it just slides over. There we go. And then I'll remove those. Round off that nose a little bit. Now I want to stop and check it and make sure they're going to fit. That front nose is a little tiny bit thick. I'll just take a little bit off right here. Now I'm going to use a fairly thick epoxy, so it really doesn't matter if it's perfect. It only needs to be close enough. Check that. That's good. I could go a little bit deeper by just a hair in the length. Do that. That should do. Now we'll put some epoxy on it. Yeah, there we go. And through the miracle of television, we have a piece of copper glued onto my ferrule. So I'm going to go back and use my spindle roughing gouge and kind of roughly shape it. Got it. Then I'm going to go to a spindle gouge and fine tune the shape. Now you can turn copper quite easily. Take light cuts, watch how the shavings come off. And it's not quite round. There we go. That's the kind of cut I want. Now I need to round over this edge. It was a little bit long. I think it still is. Need to stop the lathe and check, but just a hair. We'll just clean that up a little bit. Then I'm going to go to my skew to finish this up. I want to stop just before I hit that metal. Bit of a bad cut there. Now I want to leave my tailstock. I'm going to round over this bottom, so I'm going to get rid of some of this waste so I have room to work. We'll get rid of a little bit more of this waste. I didn't get rid of quite enough. There we go. And what I'll do is I'll whittle that away in a little bit. I'm going to go ahead now and sand, which shouldn't take much. I've got tear out right there. Let's take a little more off. I didn't get rid of all of my spindle roughing gouge marks. Same thing right there. Okay. Just got a little too aggressive. Now everybody knows how to sand, so I'm not going to sit there and show you a whole lot of that. Now I sand to 600 grit, and one thing you learn pretty quickly is don't sand across the metal and then onto the wood. It carries that color over onto the wood. So always sand the metal going this way and then go back and sand that way. When I get finished with that, I go to 4-0 steel wool. And you can sit here and polish this metal all day long with whatever you want to do. For me, most of the time, just the steel wool does fine. Leaves a pretty shiny finish. It's not super glossy. But these are tools, and I'm going to beat them up as I use them, so I don't want to go any further. Once I have that done, I go down here and use the parting tool and part it off really close. Back the tailstock off just a little bit. What I want to do is cut it really close, and then I take the toe of the skew and cut it off to that point. What I want to do is leave a little bump on there that has to be carved off. If you part it off straight, it tears the end of the wood and you end up with a lousy looking piece. Now here's a little trick I use for gluing the handle in. A lot of times when you put the shaft in there, it fits fairly snug, and if I fill it with epoxy, the epoxy wants to build up the hydraulic pressure and push it back out. So what I do is I come in here on center, drill about a 1/16 of an inch hole into that gap. And I put my epoxy in there. Try not to get it all over me and everything else while I'm doing it, apparently. Not doing real good. And I put my tool in. Normally what happens, I didn't put quite enough epoxy in there. I had a little bit larger hole than I normally do. It squirts a little bit of epoxy out into, and I can see it, into that little gap. I'll just put a little on there just in case. It squirts a little epoxy into there, which leaves that hole filled in, and then the tool won't squirt back out. So then I just have to let it cure for a while. Okay, I want to take just a few seconds to show you how I use the tools. I've made a little mock-up right here, and what I do is I drill a hole all the way through 3/8 of an inch, and then I'll take this tool and I'll go in there and I'll enlarge the opening to about a 1/2 inch. That gives me a little bit of working room. And I'll start cutting like this a little bit, and usually it only clears a tiny bit, so I have to go back in and I clear this. Go back in, I push a little deeper, clear that, push a little deeper, clear that, keep going, work my way around until I've got it pretty thin. Then I'll go back to the center hole and I'll work my way around, going back out, and eventually I get these little steps. So it makes it very easy to find that opening. Once I get those little steps established, usually I'm at the point where I can use my straight tool. Can't right there yet, obviously. I need to use the curve tool. But I go in here and I make 2 or 3 cuts, make 2 or 3 cuts, make 2 or 3 cuts, and then you go back in and you do the same thing again. You just keep enlarging those until you've got the whole thing pretty much hollowed. I will stop really frequently and measure. I use 2 different types of tools. One is this tool by my friend John Tolley in Texas that allows me to go in through the hole, and I can see the gap right here. Tells me it's that thick. That's very thin right there. Over here, so I can measure in there, see how thick it is, measure in here. Lets me get up pretty deep. You can turn it around backwards and read back in when you're trying to read these areas. The method that I used for years, then a little coat hanger, I set it for 1 inch. I go in here and I touch that wall, and you do have to be perpendicular to the wall, but you can see right there it's less than 1/8 of an inch. I can turn it around and it lets me measure using the larger part of the caliper. So I can measure all the different wall thicknesses that way. And I have different shaped coat hangers or pieces of wire that allow me to measure different parts of the ornament if the ornament's too large. And that's how I do it. I hope you all enjoy making these tools. They're fun to make and they're very functional as far as being able to hollow out ornaments.